I don't deal with allegations, I deal with facts. Your father was killed on the third attempt. There were 3 attempts to kill your father. The first one, the bullet stuck in his locks. Okay? The second one, up the road by his Jabal, escape. Third time he was gunned down. Are you aware that your mother was implicated in your father's murder? Are you aware? Are you aware that your mother was implicated in your father's murder? Are you aware? If you're not aware, and your Auntie Cheryl, who unfortunately again was gunned down, if she was alive, she would have told you that your mother was implicated in your father's murder. Or if her husband, if Auntie Cheryl's husband, who was shot days before her, who was shot days before her, if he was alive, he would have told you. And those are not allegations, those are facts. He would have told you. And there are people who can tell you, but they'll not tell you.
Good morning and welcome to the weekly press briefing of the Leader of the Opposition's office. I would like to first of all apologize for being late, and that is because we've had some technical difficulties. Thank you for those of you joining us via Facebook. Thank you for those of you members of the media that are here today. We are living in very dangerous times as far as our national security is concerned. St. Lucians would have been horrified, but not shocked, when the Housing Minister, Richard Frederick, listed in great detail what he called the facts of one of the killings of the 2010-2011 period. He recklessly told the nation that the mother of Rush Clark was implicated in his father's death. Richard Frederick said this with confidence, even though the police nor the DPP has not indicated this at all. Richard Frederick must share whatever information he has with the police commissioner, so a proper investigation can be done. He must spell out every single detail that he has pertaining to this unsolved murder. Richard Frederick must tell them what he knows that they do not know. The police must also demand if the information is not forthcoming. The information from Richard Frederick as it pertains to the murders. But what about the other killings? St. Lucians will recall in that period that there were a total of 13 killings during the 2010-2011 period. All of this would have happened while Richard Frederick was the housing minister. Does he know anything about the other killings as well? Does he know who killed Bage, for example? This is the information the police would love to have. And so the questions remain unanswered. He must also tell them the source of his information. Where did he get it from? How did he know such great detail while he was never the Minister of National Security, while he was never the police commissioner? How could a man who was the housing minister at the time know in such great detail about one of the very mysterious killings that remains unsolved today? But this is not the first time that a public statement from Richard Frederick suggests that our law enforcement efforts are gravely compromised. Remember, it was the same Richard Frederick who told us that he had received several files from the police on Dale Elliott. The same Richard Frederick said that he ordered the SSU to do patrols in the city center. The same Richard Frederick said that he was instrumental in shifting the private bodyguard of opposition leader Honorable Alan Shastney. Now he's telling us that he is intricately informed about the assassination of Rush Clark's father. In his mind, this was a great political attack on Rush Clark, the UWP candidate vying for the Central Castries seat against him. You may think, sick and out of control. Well, you're not alone in thinking this. During an altercation with his neighbor, who is a former police officer, a judge, upon hearing the case which went to our courts, suggested that Richard Frederick is completely out of control and needs to better control himself. He was fined a total of $39,000 after firing his gun during the said altercation between himself and a neighbor. However, following the killings of the 2010-2011 crime-fighting efforts in St. Lucia were severely stifled. Sanctions against our police meant that we could not access the training and buy weapons. Sanctions by the United States also included the revocation of a police officer's visa. It also included the firing of a top cop. St. Lucians would remember that. The Royal St. Lucia Police Force still have not recovered from this ordeal. An investigation into these extrajudicial killings was done and led to the famous Impacts report. Addressing the nation at the time, former Prime Minister Dr. Kenny Anthony quoted the report and said this: "Crime in St. Lucia is facilitated by politicians, government officials, police officers, and businessmen. This raises serious questions about who the politicians and police officers were." According to the Impacts report, several police officers were questioned. To date, no politician have been required to testify in the inquiry. It leaves many vexing questions unanswered. Who were the ministers in the Stephenson King administration of 2007 to 2011 fingered in the Impacts report as leading facilitators of crime? That question remains unanswered. The St. Lucia Labour Party, therefore, cannot remain silent with at least two of those cabinet members very comfortably in their fold. At least one of these cabinet ministers continues to be the main character featured in several videos of him abusing the person and property of citizens of this country. He has grown into a mafia-like personality in this country and has gone out of control and threatens to undermine the very survival of our country. We have seen how other countries that have failed to tackle and take a strong stand against characters like Richard Frederick suffocate the very possibility of national development. Let us not allow this to happen to us. Let us work together to dethrone what the St. Lucia Labour Party called the most frightening thing to have happened to the politics of this country. I thank you.
Good morning to members of the media. Good morning to those of you viewing and listening on live stream here in St. Lucia and in the diaspora. Members of the press, fellow St. Lucians, and all those who are deeply concerned about the safety and security of our beloved nation. It is with great concern and urgency that I address the growing crisis of crime in St. Lucia, particularly in our capital city. Since the St. Lucia Labour Party, the SLP, took office in 2021, an alarming 299 of our brothers and sisters have lost their lives to violent crimes. 75 homicides took place in 2021. There were 72 homicides in 2022, 75 homicides once again in 2023, and last year in 2024 there was a record-breaking 77 homicides. This means that in the 4 years since the St. Lucia Labour Party has taken over the reins of governance in this country, there were 299 St. Lucians who have been murdered. Last year, 2024, set another record for homicides, marking a 25% increase in violent crime under the Philip J. Pierre administration. This is a crisis, yet what we receive from our leaders are weak excuses, inaction, and misplaced priorities. It is deeply concerning that the Prime Minister himself also serves as Minister of National Security, yet he repeatedly distances himself from his responsibility, infamously claiming that his father was the policeman and not him. But Prime Minister, St. Lucia did not elect your father, they elected you. The responsibility of keeping our nation safe falls on your shoulders, and the bloodshed we see today is a direct consequence of your failure to act decisively. After all, you chose to be our Minister of National Security. Even more disturbing is the fact that Philip J. Pierre has allowed Minister Richard Frederick to operate within the office of the Prime Minister, despite serious allegations and troubling patterns of behavior that further undermines national security. Let us be clear. Richard Frederick is a man that members of his own SLP government have accused of criminal activities, and that includes money laundering, drug trafficking, and even murder. Yet, instead of addressing these concerns, Philip J. Pierre has chosen to empower him, making him one of the most influential figures in his government. Richard Frederick's recent statements on his weekly talk show only add to the concerns about his role in our national security. Most shockingly, he made statements alluding to inside knowledge about the assassination of Afo Clark. He spoke of 3 assassination attempts, details that neither I nor the public had ever heard before. Even more disturbingly, he went further to suggest that Mr. Rush Clark's mother is implicated. I ask this: if Richard Frederick truly has knowledge about these events, why has he not shared them with the police and with the Director of Public Prosecution? Why is he using his show to act as judge, jury, and executioner? He's targeting private citizens and attacking women, especially those who refuse to support his oppressive and divisive rule. But this is not an isolated case. Richard Frederick has openly admitted that police officers provide him with private files on citizens. He has even publicly issued directives to the Commissioner of Police on how officers should be treated based on their political stance, directives that were actually carried out. How can we expect to restore law and order when a senior government minister is allowed to operate above the law? Even the Bank of St. Lucia, the country's largest financial institution, has taken decisive action against Richard Frederick, closing both his personal bank account and those of his attaché. This raises further red flags, and we ask, what did the bank discover that caused them to take this drastic step against a sitting government minister. Yet, Philip J. Pierre remains silent, watching as his government spirals into lawlessness. The Prime Minister is allowing Richard Frederick to undermine our institutions, compromise national security, and embolden criminals, all while our streets remain unsafe and the murder rate continues to rise. A United Workers' Party government plans to change this situation. This crisis demands more than just words. It requires leadership action and solutions. As a government, we will take decisive steps to restore law and order, provide opportunities for our people, and take our communities back from crime and violence. We will do the following. 1, empowering our youth with after-school and weekend programs. We will introduce holistic after-school and weekend programs that keep our youth engaged in sports, music, technology, and vocational training, providing positive alternatives to crime and idleness. Number 2, creating more economic opportunities. Many of our young men turn to crime due to lack of employment, and so we will work to ensure that we provide support to small businesses, create more entrepreneurial opportunities, and provide them with training programs to help individuals become more self-sufficient. 3, we will improve access to affordable housing. We believe that poor living conditions contribute to crime, and we will upgrade and develop affordable housing to provide solutions so that families can live in safer, more stable environments. 4, we will use technology to fight crime. We will invest in CCTV surveillance networks, smart street lighting, and crime detecting technology to help deter and solve crimes more efficiently. 5, revitalizing sports and community development. We will introduce and upgrade sports facilities across the island and organize regular sporting competitions to keep our young men engaged in structured activities instead of turning to crime. And I say this given the fact that the opportunity for this to take place has been eroded by the squandering of the funds that should be used for youth and sporting activities from the National Lottery after guaranteeing a loan of $80 million and having the National Lottery to finance that loan with $80,000 monthly, leaving absolutely no resources to provide for those programs for young people. We will introduce youth rehabilitation and second chance programs. We will introduce rehabilitation programs for at-risk youth and for first-time offenders, giving them a chance to turn their lives around through education, skills training, and mentorship. I now place a call to action for Mr. Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip J. Pierre. Prime Minister Pierre, if you are truly serious about law and order in St. Lucia, then deal with Richard Frederick. If you are truly committed to national security, then remove him from your government. If you refuse to act, then you will be confirming what many already suspect, and that is, you are more concerned about protecting your political allies than protecting the people of St. Lucia, and that you are compromised. Our people deserve better. We deserve leaders who put St. Lucia first. We deserve a government that prioritizes safety, justice, and integrity. Enough is enough. The time for excuses is over. We will lead the charge in reclaiming our communities, restoring hope, and ensuring that our young people have a future beyond crime. Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we will allow for members of the media to ask questions. You may please direct your questions either at the Deputy Political Leader, Dominic Fede, or myself. So please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Montoot. This question is directed to you. Do you think the St. Lucia Labour Party is serious about crime with Richard Frederick in their cabinet?
Absolutely not. Because let us not forget, it is the very same St. Lucia Labour Party who disclosed the reputation and character of Richard Frederick to the population of St. Lucia. And then they turn around, in fact the Prime Minister has turned around, handpicked Richard Frederick and places him no other place but in the Prime Minister's office, making him one of his more powerful ministers, and at the same time being the main mouthpiece for the St. Lucia Labour Party. And so, what we are seeing today is not surprising, is not shocking to us, it is expected. And it tells us that we have a government that is not serious about crime fighting when they place at the helm of governance in St. Lucia an individual with the reputation and the character of Richard Frederick.
Now, earlier, the Honorable Senator spoke about response to Richard Frederick speaking about Roche Clark's mom. So this is a two-parter question. Firstly, how many of the murders from 2010 to 2024 have come before the courts?
Well, I do not have the actual figures as to how many murders between 2010 and 2024 have come before the courts. However, I can tell you there is a very low percentage in terms of resolution of crime situations. However, very interestingly, we are discovering that Richard Frederick is very intimately knowledgeable about those activities. And you ask yourself, why and how? And so, if he has so much information that he's claiming that are facts, that he has evidence of what has been taking place, that says something. And at the same time, it is concerning that he, not only was he a police officer, not only is he a lawyer, which makes him an officer of the law, he is currently a legislator in this country. And if you have such crucial information, why hasn't he come forward to report the information that he has and provided evidence to the police? Why has he not gone to the Director of Public Prosecution with that kind of information? And he sits on that information and that knowledge with so many of the crimes that he is intimately familiar with, exactly the details of, unsolved. What kind of legislator is he? What kind of officer of the law is he? What kind of government official is Richard Frederick? And when we have a Minister of National Security who knows and is aware of this, just like I am and you are, and does nothing and says nothing, we know that we are in trouble in this country and that something ought to and has to be done to ensure that we do not continue along that downward spiral of lawlessness in St. Lucia.
Now, we have seen that the SLP at points indicated that they would take action against UWP because of defamation of character. Now, due to the fact that they have a member of government who is doing the same thing, would you say whether or not Roche Clark's mother will take legal action against Richard Frederick?
Well, I cannot speak to whether or not Roche Clark's mother will take legal action against Richard Frederick, given the damning statement that he made implicating her. I am saying she is quite within her right to do so, and I would wish that she would do so, because Richard Frederick cannot continue to just attack, abuse, intimidate, and outrightly curse citizens of St. Lucia in the month, especially women, and lately I notice he has begun to do it to the dead. I'm hoping that he will not be able to continue to do so with impunity, and that at some point, I know some people who have taken action against him successfully at that, but I'm hoping that he'll be made to pay, like he has been made to pay in some other cases where he attacked other women who have taken a stance, and like when he attacked his neighbors who he fired bullets after hitting the water tank. I'm hoping that he realizes that he's not above the law. We are, after all, I'm assuming we are still in a country of law and order, and that no one, including Richard Frederick, is above the law.
So would you say that politics have gotten out of control due to the fact that Richard Frederick has released such sensitive information about his opponent?
I wouldn't say politics have gotten out of control. I would say some St. Lucian politicians have gotten out of control, namely Richard Frederick, and of course his co-conspirator, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, who's responsible for his presence and for what he's currently doing publicly, Honorable Philip JPA.
Okay, so should the United Workers' Party take any responsibility to what is obviously a breakdown in politics in St. Lucia?
I don't think you can blame the United Workers' Party for this, because we are out here speaking against it. If we were complicit in terms of promoting that kind of politics, we would not be advocating against it. What we are calling for is to pull back the reins and to bring the politics of St. Lucia back on a more cordial, more civilized level. And I think to achieve this, one of the first things that has to be done is for us to get rid of the likes of Richard Frederick in the politics of St. Lucia, and to get rid of the St. Lucia Labour Party, who embraces, encourages, and condones that kind of behavior.
Thank you very much, Mr. Montoot. My next question is for Senator Fady.
And the next question is for Senator Fady. Senator Fady, could you please come up?
Senator Fady, I have two questions for you. The first one is this Richard Frederick bashing, or is this serious concerns as it pertains to crime?
Well, I wouldn't use words like that, but what I can tell you is that when you look at the show on a Thursday night and you observe for yourself the kinds of filth that comes out, the kinds of fire, the kinds of abuse, the kinds of narrative that spread hate in this country. I mean, for example, every Thursday, St. Lucians are being learned to be racist, where Richard Frederick calls the leader of the opposition a white man, and where, because of the color of his skin, Richard Frederick suggests that he should be disqualified from ever participating in the politics of this country. On this show, Richard Frederick sees it as a very good or strong political attack on his opponent, Rush Clark, to recklessly suggest that his mother was implicated in his father's death. That's a very damning allegation. That's a very serious allegation that raises more questions than answers. These killings have been unresolved, and it opens up the question to questions about how many of these other killings. Remember, there were 13 killings in the era of 2010, 2011, the Operation Restore Confidence era. And those killings have been largely unresolved. We saw the DPP with a press conference, and he really said to us that most of these were still unresolved. And so we need to ask ourselves, what else does Richard Frederick know? I think it goes deeper than Richard Frederick as well. There are other people in the St. Lucia Labour Party cabinet. I'm not satisfied that the Minister for CIP, Ernest Hilaire, is off the hook or with with accusations against him regarding money laundering and fraud pertaining to our CIP program. He has to answer questions as well. Flagging diplomatic immunity or protection under the international diplomatic cover doesn't exonerate him at all and doesn't make him an innocent man. So he has to answer those questions as well. And Prime Minister Pierre, who has the obligation to keep all of us safe, to keep our country as a country of law and order, has to as well make take a very serious stand against any sign of criminal behavior. This is what the Prime Minister promised us. You've got Wayne Girard, who's the MP for Ancillary Canneries, was the CEO of Freedom Bay, while the company had robbed dozens, hundreds of pensioners from the UK of their savings. And you would recall they raised in excess of 40 plus million US dollars and never built the hotel in Freedom Bay. And all of these guys are in the cabinet. So you've got Richard Frederick, whose visa have been revoked. You've got Hilaire, who have been accused of presiding over a ministry of money laundering and fraud. Then you've got Wayne Girard, who was the CEO of this private company that raised at least $40+ million from the UK pensioners. And then he's there. It is famously reported on the ground in ancillary canneries that the former Prime Minister, Kenny Anthony, just like he doesn't want Richard Frederick, would not touch Girard because he felt then that Girard's money weren't coming from very clean hands. So you've got all of this that is wrapped up that we need to now make sure that the ministers who are in cabinet are role models, that they're setting the right example, that they are not facilitators of the crime, but they are indeed enemies of crime, that they are going to stand and take a stand with all of us to say, look, what is happening in this country is wrong, and if something important is not done very seriously and very soon, then the St. Lucia we know can look like something totally different.
To add on to my first question, do you think that the special prosecutor should look into the allegations made about Minister Richard Frederick?
I think absolutely. And what has to be done is that the United Workers' Party must make that complaint and to take that matter to the special prosecutor. I believe that all of these unanswered questions, unsolved crime situations, whether it is through the CIP or it's through the crime fighting efforts in the country, we must take a very strong stance against corruption. When a country's government is corrupt, then it is very difficult for the leadership of that country to stem corruption that can permeate throughout the entire society.
And my final question to you, Senator Fede, is there too much focus on Richard Frederick? Should we be having consultations?
No, not at all. I think that Richard Frederick has said a lot. He said that he ordered the SSU to go and do patrolling in the city center. Now, how does a housing minister get that power? Where does he get that legal standing from? Where does he get that authority from to go and order a unit of your police force to do patrolling? How does he come up with information about Rush Clark's mom and his father's assassination? How does he come up with saying that he has information on or files given to him by the police, he claims, about the situation of Dale Elliott? How does he get to influence the transfer of the Prime Minister's private bodyguard? This points to a very dangerous situation in our country. All of these public pronouncements made by Richard Frederick himself are very damning, they are cancerous, and we need to aggressively fight against this cancer. If we don't fight against this cancer, then this cancer is going to aggressively attack the very survival of our country in every aspect of its aspirations.
Thank you, Senator Fede. My last question goes to Spider Montut.
Yes, sir.
Good day, Mr. Montut. My final question. Do you believe that the police force is being controlled by Minister Richard Frederick?
Well, there is every indication that that is the case. And what I can say to you for sure is that by Richard Frederick's utterances, by his very disclosures, by his actions, he has certainly put the police force into disrepute, and he has certainly compromised the integrity of the St. Lucia police force. We have seen Richard Frederick on television publicly waving files that he claims were given to him by the police. Okay, that in itself is frightening, because how can such sensitive documents and sensitive information on citizens of this country be handed over to Richard Frederick? I ask the question, in what capacity is that being done? And we have heard Richard Frederick, just as Senator Dominic Fede indicated, on television, publicly indicating that he has had the SSU, the Special Services Unit, to carry out patrol on his behalf. He has given directives directly to the city police as to what exactly he wants done. And he has gone further to give directives to the police commissioner as to what exactly he wants done and to whom. Now, the police has remained silent in the face of all of this. The police commissioner has not come out and give us the comfort and the reassurance that Richard Frederick does not have the power nor the authority to do so, that is, to control and direct the police. As a matter of fact, on the contrary, we have every reason to believe that he has been given that power, because some of what he requested of the police commissioner were actually fulfilled. And so it is a very disturbing development that Richard Frederick, who is not a police commissioner, who is not the Minister of National Security, can publicly direct the police, can get sensitive, confidential information from the police, and is able to publicly divulge that information and wave files in the face of St. Lucians. That is a very dangerous trend. And when you hear him talking about evidence and facts about unsolved crimes, murders no less, that is very disturbing. Not to mention, when you add the reputation, the notoriety of the man that has been divulged to us by the St. Lucia Labour Party, when you add that to the mix, we have a very dangerous, potentially explosive situation taking place in this country. This has to be dealt with once and for all in the interest of our national security and in the interest of law and order in this country.
A major question that has come from online is that the United Workers' Party is focusing on Richard Frederick too much and not going into the breakdown of CIP and GPH. What is the party's strategy to help combat this narrative and discuss and break it down for the laymen to understand?
It is not that we are focusing on Richard Frederick too much. Richard Frederick is the point man for the St. Lucia Labour Party, who articulates all their policies, their principles, and their positions on various matters. And when you hear Richard Frederick speak, he speaks for the government, he speaks for the Prime Minister. Of course, we have heard him with his attacks on women. That is a St. Lucia Labour Party policy. We have heard him with his racist attacks. That again, you have heard other members of the St. Lucia Labour Party do the same. We have heard him with his xenophobic attacks on St. Lucian citizens who were not born here in this country. That again is a St. Lucia Labour Party position. We have even heard the Prime Minister himself make xenophobic statements, and of course of late it is Richard who is the most vociferous and the one carrying the flag for them on those issues. We have a government of bigots, and the main one who is out there, who is publicly promoting bigotry, is Richard Frederick. Thank you.
One more question. Morning, Mr. Montut. It's a question from an online reporter from Caribbean Headline News. Why do you think that there has been silence from the government regarding the closure of Richard Frederick's bank accounts at the Bank of St. Lucia?
Again, that is what the St. Lucia Labour Party and the Prime Minister calls transparency. They claim to be transparent, but we can see right through their transparency that they are not transparent. Richard Frederick is a public official, and as such, that is a matter of public interest. If a minister's bank account is closed, and we all have an idea why an institution will take such a drastic action against a sitting government minister, it is important that either Richard Frederick himself or the Prime Minister come out to appease the citizens of this country, to let us know that there was nothing untoward, or in fact, if there was, let us know exactly what the reason was why Richard Frederick's bank account was closed. In the meantime, since nobody has spoken on it, not Richard Frederick, not the Prime Minister who heads the cabinet in which he sits, we are free to speculate. And I can say to you, one of the reasons that I know why a bank would take such an unprecedented, unusual action, some just drastic action, is because of money laundering. So I am asking the question, is Richard Frederick, in fact, as he has been accused by the St. Lucia Labour Party, a money launderer, and that is the reason why the bank has closed his account? I want to know. And we are asking the government to come out and clear the air on that matter.
One more question from online media. Are you concerned that Minister Frederick is the head of the city police, headed by the Ministry of Local Government, of which he is the head?
It is very concerning, because when a reckless, spiteful, vindictive, vile individual like Richard Frederick has such power, we have seen him demonstrate time and again that he has the compunction to attack private, defenseless citizens, especially women. Of late, he's even attacking the dead. So when a person like him has such powers in his hands, it is, in fact, a frightening situation. It is a very dangerous situation. We know of the divisive rhetoric of Richard Frederick. If we allow the St. Lucia Labour Party and Richard Frederick to continue to promote that kind of divisiveness in our country, soon, when we talk about law and order, what we will have in St. Lucia here is civil uprising of one against the other. We're going to have probably ethnic cleansing even, when you listen to their rhetoric, and we're going to have all kinds of discrimination and violence against each other in this country. That we must stem and nip from the bud. We cannot allow that to take root in our country. We do not know this kind of attitude and behavior in our country, and we should not tolerate it from our leaders. Any more questions?
Sorry, there's one more which came through. Minister Frederick was a few weeks ago on TV, on his show, calling out names of private citizens within the city. Who he claimed were criminals. What are your thoughts on this?
Again, the recklessness, and crass nature of that so-called minister, Richard Frederick. He, as a sitting member of parliament, a legislator, he as a member of the cabinet should be far more responsible than this. You cannot be judge, jury, and executioner, and you cannot utilize your talk show to simply just malign, accuse, attack, and spoil the name or bring the name of citizens of this country into disrepute. Richard Frederick knows, under our laws here in St. Lucia, a man or woman is presumed innocent until proven guilty. You cannot declare a person a criminal just so. If he knows for a fact that they are criminals, he should bring his information again, bring that information to the police and to the Director of Public Prosecution, so that those people could be properly investigated through the processes that we have in place in a lawful manner. And if they are in fact guilty, they are found guilty, for them to be prosecuted. We cannot have that kind of reckless behavior coming from a government minister. Again, that is indicative of the approach, the style, and the modus operandi of the St. Lucia Labour Party government. That is dangerous. And if once they have an issue with you, they can take to the airwaves and malign you in that manner, attack you and intimidate you in that manner, we have a breakdown of law and order in this country. And what we're going to have soon from now is anarchy, directed by a government that seems to have dictatorial tendencies.
And this one looks like the final, Minister.
Okay.
Mr. Piaro,
Yeah.
Given all these allegations surrounding Minister Frederick, why do you think that the Prime Minister has not dealt with these atrocities more forcefully?
Well, that is a very interesting question. Why hasn't the Prime Minister dealt with it? My questions are, is it because he is compromised? Is it because he is afraid of Richard Frederick? Or is it simply because he is a weak leader who does not have the qualities required of a leader, which is courage and integrity? I ask those questions in response to your question. Thank you. I would like now to take this opportunity to thank all of you who have been viewing United Workers' Party press briefing this morning. We want to thank those of you in the diaspora and those of you around St. Lucia, and we ask that you please stay tuned and return next week Tuesday when we'll have another press briefing. And let me take this opportunity to invite you to listen to Meet the Opposition on Thursday morning on RevUp, and of course we'll be live streaming as well. See you and hear you Thursday morning. Thank you.